Hello friends, I'm Neha and I welcome you all to my channel English Stories with Neha. Today I'm going to be reading They Haven't Even Won My Heart and Mind by Maxwell Brooks. It's a short story and a very interesting one at that. Let's hear it. They haven't even won my heart and mind. I feel the jackal sway below me, the dust-red road unrolling in front and the stunted mahogany scrub flashing alongside. We pass women bent double under towering loads of firewood and are passed by young men on mopeds in turn. I make it a point to always wave with my left hand only. The right stays welded to the .50 caliber. You can always tell there is a village ahead because the trees start to thin and the umber houses begin to multiply. They could have been built yesterday or 100 years ago, and the only thing that changes is the age of the squatting men or women outside. The children are eternal. I'm the third vehicle in the patrol, so my cupola is always pointed right. The others cover their own arches, and together we create a lethal bubble, a pinprick of British-owned ground that roams back and forth across this continent as we please, or must. We're currently heading northeast, so if we were to fire an imaginary round, it could in theory carry on to Niger or Chad, or curving slightly even Kenya and the sea. I've spent a lot of time in Kenya at Nanyuki or Archer's Roast, and it's so like here and so different I struggle to put into words exactly why. I often imagine what it would see, that bullet, miles and miles and miles of much the same, sand or jungle or scrub but always sweat. West Africa is nothing if not consistent. Except when it isn't, of course. I passed the doggone cliffs once and saw their houses chiseled by hand from the rock, a conveyancer's nightmare with a housing chain that stretches back to history. The people there waved back most of the time. I haven't been to Jen yet, and the pictures of the mud moss seem underwhelming. I'm from a people of great grey stone cathedrals, and to honor God with mud seems lesser. Although, again, I couldn't tell you why. Still they get bums on seats or woven mats to be precise, while my own church echoes. I watched them pull that mud from the river once, our patrol idling on the hill above. They do it by hand. Men in great pirogue canoes, dredging it to the shore, while others load it by the shovelful onto Toyota trucks, more dent than metal. Perhaps that is a secret. They must always shore up the cracks, and labor is itself part of the prayer. Probably that's just bollocks, and they work like I do, for people and purposes they don't quite believe. For money that's not quite enough, because that's the way it's always been, and that's the way we always are. However, I have something else. My blue helmet and the white paint on the sides of my wagon say I'm the servant of high and noble cause. We are here to keep the peace. Never mind that we only keep it on small blue squares, on a map and on the smaller blue roads that connect them. The red squares slip around anyway, money and murder in their hearts, with AK-47s hidden in bundles of wood and carried by young men on mopeds probably. I've been briefed, sometimes I even believe it, that somewhere down that confusing chain from the words announced in Paris to the paper signed in Whitehall to the oil-slick machine gun in my hands, there is a plan. The plan holds the secrets to peace and perhaps more importantly prosperity, although the plan is vague about for who. I've heard that one before, twice. It didn't work then, and it got a lot of people fucked up in the trying. Bloody pointless, bloody embarrassing. You mustn't say these kind of things in front of the senior NCO's mind. They fought and sweated and lost legs and friends and lives, although for what they too will struggle to say. When they're drunk, it's different. Their tears and anger come, followed shortly by smashed glasses and maybe a bit more blood for good measure. You mustn't really say anything, that all in front of the officers. The real head shed, not your troop leader, who's just as baffled as you. The real officers, the signet ring and school tie wearers, have been taught to bluff from birth and now they do it for a sport. Nothing so vulgar as a living. Questioning them will mark you a bad egg, a quaint name for career death sentence. It's best to keep quiet. Do your time. Look out for the lads. Still, peacekeeping isn't just so bad. We do our patrols, and it's just like the ads really. You're finally out on the ground, soldiering. It's nothing like Afghan or even Iraq. That was some real kinetic fun you missed out on. But you were too young for that, and this is better than Cyprus or another round of freezing your bollocks off in Estonia. This is what you've always wanted, to soldier, to be a soldier. You've said it since you could speak. It was all you ever wanted. But for some reason, nobody ever took it seriously. You'd been small and sensitive and soft. It hadn't been easy, but now you were big and fit and tough, on the outside at least. Inside you still cracked when you saw the little bodies wrapped in little white sheets, but still tough outside for enough in this line of work for a while. Mom and Dad weren't happy, but that was a given. Your brothers and sisters had the brains or the drive or the luck and they've got nice sensible jobs. Mom had wanted you to be a journalist, to use your brain and write about politics or society or what people wore to fancy parties. They still never quite processed it, to be honest. Describing life in the army might as well be like describing life on the moon. You told the funny stories, but even they didn't quite translate, what with having to edit out all the good swearing or turn all the acronyms and argot into something resembling English. Most of all, it was hard to capture that it was a different world with different rules, just like out here. Funny that how the different worlds all stacked atop one another. You could say and do and be things that just wouldn't fly back home. And you liked it as much as you hated it. For every funny story or minute behind the gun, there was an ocean of tedium, an institutional autism to swim through. Somebody had described it as an abusive relationship and everyone had laughed, but it rang true. It rang true because when it was bad, it was the worst, and when it was good, it felt like flying. You wonder if your family could picture you now, your feet resting on the stacked and strapped ammunition below you, the wind catching the day rigger schmag wrapped around your face. You'd show them some of the pictures, but you'd see in their faces it didn't quite pass. This was a film or someone else. You supposed it didn't really matter. It wasn't like you cared to picture their lives, not truly. Tapping away on keyboards or having meeting after meeting. Your brother had told you he'd spent 2 hours discussing what type of font to use once. Christ. You think about the bullet's path again, a bit like your own life. You suppose a lot of noise at the start and then a parabola rising until you hit your peak before the world pulled you down. Was this really your peak? How could you tell? It wasn't holding off the Russians at the Suwalki Gap, but it wasn't being a peace jest either, so perhaps that's not so bad. You'll at least try to tell Mom and Dad about it when you're back. You'll edit it, of course. You'll tell them about the landscape and the people and the music and the lightning storms that fell like Mufasa in The Lion King. A poor smile for something that sees your chest so entirely. You won't tell them about your interpreter's wife, about how she was only 12 for fuck's sake, but apparently that's just their way. You won't tell them about the Malian soldiers back from the punitive patrol, the smoke and the screaming still stinking out the uniforms. You won't tell them about how you suspected from the start it was all so fucking pointless. Timbuktu is in Mali. you knew you'd never see it. The insurgents, freedom fighters, terrorists, bandits, future governments owned it, and it was tough to articulate why that was such a bad thing. Some analyst or minister had decreed that this group of assholes weren't sort of group of assholes, and so they must be opposed. Until, of course, something changed somewhere, and they must be supported. They had always been supported. Still, as routines were, this wasn't so bad. Your family and friends back home in that green and grey country wouldn't ever see this red and orchard one. You got to live it, a little piece of history and adventure for a little while, and you think that's probably more than most people get. Maybe a few years from now, you'll have a new routine, one that they can picture in their heads. So friends, this was a short story called They Haven't Even Won My Heart and Mind by Maxwell Brooks. Hope you liked it. And if you have any suggestions regarding any new story you would want me to read in upcoming episodes of mine, then you can suggest it in the comment section and I could read it to you the next time round. I would also request you to please like my content, share, comment and subscribe the channel. With a promise to return with another story another time in another episode. Till then, take care.